Israel's army says its ground troops have surrounded Gaza City and effectively divided the strip in two. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry says more than 200 people have been killed following major Israeli airstrikes, which also caused a communications blackout inside the territory. Meanwhile, the leaders of major UN agencies have called for an immediate ceasefire and for more humanitarian aid.
The Israel Defense Forces have once again intensified operations in northern Gaza. They say they are targeting Hamas fighters and infrastructure from the air, sea and land. Israel has repeatedly warned civilians to move south, where it is supposed to be safer. But a planned humanitarian corridor did not materialise, and those who do risk the journey say it's very dangerous.
We've been walking for 3 hours to get here. I can't walk, and my son has been pushing me all the way.
The situation is very difficult. There's no bread, no water, nothing. Tanks in front of us, and dead bodies. It was very, very scary, especially for the kids.
The Israeli military has released what it says is evidence that Hamas is blocking roads to stop civilians leaving and using schools and hospitals as cover for its attacks.
This is part of an operation, a ground operation that was conducted on the hospital, then revealed a tunnel that was being used for terror infrastructures in the Qatari hospital. They launch rockets on Israel 75 meters from an hospital. Why? They know precisely that if Israel will airstrike a launch pad like that, the hospital would be damaged.
As the attacks in the north intensify, Israel now says it has split the Gaza Strip into two. And despite increasing international calls for a ceasefire, Israel says that won't happen until all the hostages held by Hamas are freed. And until then, those on the ground can only take shelter and hope to survive.
Let's speak to DW's correspondent Rebecca Ritters reporting from Jerusalem. Rebecca, Israel says its military has split the Gaza Strip in two amid Israel's ground operation. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, that's right. We had confirmation yesterday that there is now a North Gaza and a South Gaza, that Israeli troops had made their way to the beach, to the shoreline, basically, and they were holding that line. They've now also completely encircled Gaza City, and it's being reported that in the next 48 hours or so, we can expect to see Israeli troops actually inside Gaza City, out on the ground, with close combat with Hamas fighters there. Now, we've seen a really heavy bombardment overnight, with some people saying it's been the heaviest night in the ground operations so far, with some truly horrific sights coming out from the bombing, particularly in Gaza Hospital. We know that areas around the Al-Shifa Hospital have been bombed, with the IDF saying continually, and yesterday, showing what they say is evidence that Hamas are using these hospitals as headquarters. We've also heard from some medical personnel, though, saying that there aren't armed militants in these hospitals, and that this is in fact false. It's very hard to independently verify anything. There's no international journalists allowed inside. There's no other organisations allowed inside Gaza. So we do know that there's been an internet blackout overnight, though we have been hearing that has slowly been being restored. So these calls for people to move away, to evacuate, falling on people that may not be able to even be getting the messages. So really, really serious situation, and looking to intensify into yet another stage of this conflict.
Indeed, a very difficult situation for civilians there in Gaza. The IDF has said it is allowing civilians to move from northern Gaza to the south using a one-way corridor. Will that be a safe option for people to flee?
It's hard to determine, though we know that civilians have been being caught up in attacks even as they've been trying to head from north to south. We know that the Israeli military have been telling civilians to leave for some weeks now, and they have, as you say, cleared up that corridor, or they've said that they've opened that corridor to allow for civilians to go in that one-way route into the south. Whether or not that's going to be much relief, we know that there are a lot of civilians who just simply aren't able to move, or perhaps are unwilling, and either way will be stuck inside this besieged area. But we also know that the Israeli military has been targeting, or at least bombing, areas in the south, even in the areas where civilians have been told to go that are safe. So, more people, I assume, will be using that window. The window is from 10 until 2 local time today. We're in the middle of that window at the moment. I can assume that some people will be using that route, but whether or not it will make them any safer when they're in the south really remains to be seen.
Rebecca, thank you very much for that update. That's DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters reporting from Jerusalem. Now, Jordan's king has revealed that the country's military dropped medical supplies into the Gaza Strip overnight. In a message on the social media platform X, King Abdullah announced that urgent medical aid had been airdropped at midnight and added that Jordan would always be there to assist Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Now, the Israeli military has confirmed that the operation was completed with its cooperation. And Christian Katzer is the head of Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, here in Germany. He joins us from Berlin. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I understand that Doctors Without Borders is continuing to operate in Gaza as best it can under extremely difficult conditions. How much support are your staff currently able to provide?
It is very difficult to operate in Gaza right now. We have actually literally told all our staff to be free of their work, to first care for their families and themselves. Nevertheless, a lot of our staff have chosen to continue to work. It is very difficult with supplies running dramatically low all the time, even though some resupplies had been possible into Gaza. We see, a lack of fuel, a lack of water, a lack of the basics and medication, which makes medical decision-making very hard.
Indeed. Tell me a little bit more about that. With such a dire need for your staff to attend to those who are critically injured, are other more basic primary care needs being met at all?
What we hear from our staff is that getting food and water for themselves and the families is very, very difficult. To find a safe space to sleep is almost impossible, even in the south of Gaza, just because of the mass of people. What we see also that in hospitals, with the lack of fuel, running generators is impossible to most of the time, and therefore conducting quality medical care is impossible, with a lot of people needing special attention due to fighting, but also due to chronic diseases where, like high blood pressure or other things, newborn children can't be put on an incubator because there's no electricity. So the medical situation in Gaza is without words.
Now, the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry has said that close to half of those who've been killed are children, are minors. Are you seeing that percentage also reflected in the number of patients who are being treated by Doctors Without Borders?
We see a lot of patients injured due to the fighting, and among them is a high proportion also of women and children. But also one has to remember that not every man in this context is a fighter, and also due to international laws, even if somebody had been fighting and is wounded, should be warranted special protection. That's one of the points which we definitely see. It needs a pause in the fighting to allow for humanitarian access to reach Gaza, and for people in Gaza to reach humanitarian aid and medical aid. We hear from our patients that actually accessing medical facilities is super difficult for security reasons.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us on DW News. We really appreciate your time. That is Christian Katzer with Doctors Without Borders.
Thank you very much.